gotta lead us to higher ground. Higher ground. Through the challenges we'll navigate, helping them become the best and elevate. Oh yeah. Rising above, reaching for the sky, unlocking potential we won't deny. In the sweet spot, we'll pave the way, transform the leaders day by day.
Too much, my friends. Sweet spot. They threw me off dancing and making jokes before we could start. But we're here, as every week, we got two co-hosts, Howard Hilton and Paul Lewis.
Yes, Howard started by saying, I'm looking to see if there's anybody I could hire to replace Carlos.
Oh, I didn't. That's actually, yeah, okay. I can see how you took it that way. What I meant, Carlos, was I am interviewing for a producer for my day job. It just happened to be that I thought about it when you kicked off the really long intro song that only we see.
Oh, that's cool. I was gonna record because I'm like, Paul is like dancing. I'm like, I've never seen Paul dancing like that. I'm like, I should have recorded my screen with that.
So
I am in a great mood. That's why.
Yes, it's important for everyone to understand that we are T-minus very little time to the best week of our year.
That's correct.
Right?
Wait, best week?
Absolutely the best week. So let's just get it out there. Paul and I have had a love affair with each other for a while. And we don't get to see each other very often. I mean, the truth is Paul's family, and we don't get to see each other very often. So next week, we spend an entire week with each other. Additionally, it is Gartner, which is not why we're excited, but we're excited because the venue is Disney property.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So we have 5 days in parks next week.
Yes, 5 days in parks. One of them with such exclusivity that we should be able to back our favorite ride several times.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. Which park is next week?
Epcot.
Oh,
Epcot
yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Epcot was the one I liked the least before I started doing the Gartner holiday. So I had a really bad experience the first time I went to Epcot. I went as part of a group, and it was a group of people that were significantly older than me, much more stodgy. And Epcot, the deal is you can dine around the world. And so they made a reservation at arguably the worst place in the world to have a reservation, which is Germany.
I was going to say that.
It's Lederhosen beer, which I do not drink. I drink everything but beer. I even drink grappa. And for those who just heard that word and know what I mean, I even drink grappa. I've actually gone out of my way to find grappa. I do not drink beer. And the food is just the blandest food in all of Epcot.
They do have a cold meat salad. So there's a little bit of a bonus there. It's just slices of
everywhere else. Compared to everywhere else, no. However, going there with Paul and my wife has totally changed my viewpoint on Epcot. Not to mention the nearly 20 years since I went for the first time, the rides have improved. Like at the time, the AT&T golf ball was like the ride. There wasn't a tremendous amount else, right? So I rather enjoy Epcot.
And that was before they even retrofitted Spaceship Earth. It's now Dame Judi Dench.
Right. No. It was just an AT&T commercial at the time. Like it was awful, and it was like it was about as much distance as you could get in the golf ball from when it originally launched as an AT&T commercial to then. Right, like it was the least amount of relevance that it had. It looked the most dated that it had ever looked, and then we did that, and I went to the German beer garden, which made me wish to go back on the AT&T ride. It was awful, but now I look forward to it. So yes, so it is our annual pilgrimage to the Mouse, which you and my wife have been planning for roughly 12 months.
That's correct.
I think we started planning when we were in the park last year.
That's right. Next time, let's do this.
Yeah.
Are the kids coming or no?
It's next week.
It's next
I know
week.
are the kids coming or no?
My oldest is coming. My oldest
Right.
is
Mine is not. Mine cannot afford
just for
it. It doesn't
just
give a
for
shit.
clarity for anybody who works with us or works for us. We are in fact actually going to the conference. In
Correct.
addition, we might also go to the
That's what I was gonna go. So the idea is the conference, but then the conference have this benefit to be able to be on the park, stuff like that.
Correct. So when I worked on the customer side, this was my favorite conference. I mean, when I worked anywhere except where I work now, this was my favorite conference.
Right. You have a little bit of a bias at the moment.
Well, it was it's still probably the most valuable conference I go to every year. So I work for a competitor of Gartner, right? That it's not been a secret, but I just want to make it clear because it plays into this conversation. And Gartner is the biggest influence in IT buying trends and strategies that exist currently. You might be able to argue that any one of the three hyperscalers kind of plays in there, but the reality is Gartner affects your operating model and they do not.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right? So Gartner is the biggest influence. Someday I hope to be as big as Gartner. Like, wish me luck. Great. But I don't work for Gartner because I believe they fundamentally do a disservice to their end users. I think they're too expensive, and I also just think they happen to be outdated. They're just simply not aligned with the agility that we need. That being said, this conference is the week where they tell everyone what their messaging will be for the next 12 months. So I would go every year because I want to get a jump start on what is Gartner going to tell me and my company and my peers for the next 12 months so that I can develop a plan in how to address it. Right? It was huge when we were at Hitachi for exactly the same reason, right? My decks were 170 slides on average coming back from this conference that I would present to Hitachi to talk about this is what Gartner said, this is what we need to do about it, this is how we need to address it, this is what we should be prepared for, right? It's still immensely valuable for that, even if 3 years ago all they talked about was meta. The last 2 years all they talked about is AI, and this year they're just going to talk about AI again.
So I was going to ask you about that. So last year it was AI, but the previous year also. So what was the change between?
Do I have the years wrong? Was last year AI and the previous year meta? I may have 2 AI years. I think it was the previous year was meta.
Yeah, there was only 1 year of AI. Definitely last year was very AI centric.
Yeah. So what was the initial release or what they were telling the companies that they should be focusing on AI on last year's conference? So to get the people a little bit of a background.
Sure. AI is going to eat everything. You have to do AI. Generative AI is the way the world is going to work. This content is created by generative AI. The next content will be created by generative AI. Jump on the bandwagon or die hopeless by yourself in a dark room.
So did they predicted that we were gonna see the iRobot thingy coming out?
I mean, eventually. Yeah, eventually, right? Like they talked about this was the beginning of the AI revolution, and if you're not doing AI by the time that Gartner was in session last year, you're already too late, and all kinds of things that were. I mean, they were wrong. They were just wrong to tell people. That's not spoiled milk. That's literally they've slid it backwards on their hype cycle. Right.
Correct.
We've seen.
And in fairness, the hyperscalers were also hyper.
Everyone was.
Yeah, right. So it's not like Gartner was ahead of it.
No.
Yeah.
Gartner was absolutely not at the front of the pack. Gartner was absolutely not the first person telling everybody AI everything.
Yeah.
Right.
What was this one of those things like when everybody was buying toilet paper that they were just trying to sell out? So all the hyperscalers and all these companies were just trying to boost sales or something?
So let's look at motivation for a moment. The job of the hyperscaler is to sell hyperscalability. It's right in their names. The hyperscalers sell hyperscalability. There is nothing requiring more scalability than whatever the new hotness is. Because the time it takes you to go through the contracts, free up space in your data center, install cabinets, install power, right? Calculate cooling, work out your contracts, do your POC, go through procurement, get everything online, train your people, all that stuff is 9 months, let's say, right? It's 9 months to onboard a new capability that requires data center square footage. It's 9 seconds to click 3 buttons and have the service available to you in AWS or Azure or GCP, right? They're all about how do we take the newest hotness and let you know we have that ready for you right now. It's just sitting there waiting for you to click 3 buttons, right? They're motivated to do that. It does not matter whether it has a value to you or not. It doesn't matter what the value is, how you get to the value, none of those things. You're supposed to determine that before you click the 3 buttons, right?
And knowing that 25 to 30% of total workloads, all workloads, are in the cloud, right? So not 70, 25 to 30%. And those were the easy things to put in the cloud, either something new I created or something that I've migrated over.
Yep.
It became incredibly clear over the last 18 months, that they've come into the point where the hard stuff begins, and that requires a different TCO. It requires different investment. It requires different sets of tooling. Yeah. This is much more complex. And in order for them to grow at the 20 to 30 times rate, they needed other means to create consumption. Inference doesn't create a lot of consumption, but training creates a lot of consumption, right? Creating features within their existing services for you to use those services more, create consumption. So that's, where they jumped into, was to say, well, I'm going to AI enable things that I have, and I'm going to create an AI build process so you can, modify a model from a model garden and implement it at your own will. And then you're going to consume 20 GPUs to do a training model, and that's going to cost you 10 grand, right? And it's getting it up, right? Because the effort it takes to migrate your core banking application to the cloud is not economically feasible. So they need to find something else.
For sure. There are also companies who live and die on the bleeding edge of technology and hire accordingly and staff accordingly, right? And so the kind of hump the rest of us have to climb over to integrate something into our operating model, they don't have that hump. Their entire operating model is built on the integration of the newest, latest hotness to the point that it is cloud production ready, which is not enterprise production ready.
Right.
And so they don't have a choice but to talk about the latest hotness. They don't have a choice but to create as much hype as they can, because it increases the desirability and the FOMO around cloud. Replace cloud with any vendor and you effectively have the same thing. So here's where it's a problem. It's a problem because we need consultants and analysts to not do that. We need consultants and analysts to do the opposite of that. We need them to put the brakes on everything that's not truly enterprise grade, that's not truly enterprise ready, that doesn't have an entire ecosystem of the process and the people around it, not just the tools. And unfortunately, what we find is that's really hard to do. And so kind of what everybody does is they just focus on the tools. And then it's up to you to figure out the people in the process. And that's why I have a problem with it. And that's why I have a complaint with it. And that's why I don't work for a different analyst organization.
Or they sell their newest wares into the largest organizations. Like I generally refer to it as AI for some instead of AI for all, right?
For sure.
So they're selling into the Walmarts, the banks, the telcos of the world because they have big, bad beasts and a lot of R&D money and realistically can spend $10 million and not bat an eye. Where everybody else can't. Right? They don't have that luxury. They have to pick a use case that they know will actually have a return versus do some interesting experimentation with hundreds of GPUs and hope, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
You just mentioned something interesting. That is that some companies can drop money for R&D while others are just looking for how can I put this into production? And they think that they can just put their first product or their first system and make it AI enabled. And is that what they were hearing from these conferences? Because I know that we have had the conversation on the show before, but was that some of the messaging that actually stopped some of the big companies from moving forward? Because they hit that roadblock. I cannot put my core ERP system online with all these AI tools because I don't know how to actually make it a reality.
Yeah, but there's no assumption of that. The assumption is you do it now or you're left behind. Like that was the message last year. The message last year was it doesn't matter how fast you are, you must figure it out, and you must figure it out by the time you leave the conference.
That's
Right?
impossible.
Well, all
And
of it's
the-
impossible.
And the regression of AI build tools from getting out of the trough back into the trough, as at the summer, showcased what happens when you deploy a set of tools that aren't ready to solve most use cases, and that you're constantly updating it. And when you constantly update it, you're changing the names, you're changing the usage, you're changing the patterns, you're changing the cost of all those things. And therefore, every new tool is a new experience, and nobody's going to like that. Right? It's not just adding features. You're literally changing the name of the technologies. Right? You're going from Bard to Gemini.
Right.
And now have this big umbrella technology set, which aren't even really aligned in any real way.
But didn't we have like a bull or something else? Bison.
I mean, Google can't figure out what the name of their AI
before
is.
Bard was Bison, and then it was Gemini, and the names were weird.
I think Google needs to have a rule that all of their products begin with an A name in version 1, and they do like Ubuntu. The letter of the product name changes as they re-release. If they did that, they'd be on Google AI Umaguma. Right. They'd rapidly be looking at, oh crap, next year it's going to have to be Aardvark because we've gone all the way through the alphabet and now we need 2 A's to start all over again.
I do think that since last year was a lot of, in Gartner specifically, but also in hyperscalers, was a lot of AI build. In other words, here's a set of tools and people and processes to build AI agents and applications for your business. And here is 1,000 use cases that you can't afford to implement. Like that was the theme. I think the theme this year might be, we still think you should do AI, but I don't want you to forget all the embedded features of the systems you already consume. Right, your current ITSM, your current CRM, your current SaaS-based insert core system, because they all have AI features too, and they are already connected to your data and aligned to your security profiles. Yeah.
Terrible. It's awful. we have spent decades trying to tell people stop building siloed systems. Now what we're saying is here's 400 siloed AIs. Enjoy. Good luck. I wish you the best. That's not sustainable, right? That's not reasonable. None of them perform the same, right? The efficacy delta from system to system is enormous. It's not even close. It's enormous, right? And so you're going to spend all this time learning Gen AI, learning like how to use Gen AI to do your job, and then they're going to go, cool, here's Gen AI in the next application. Works. The results are completely different. Please don't trust it like you think you should trust it. But we're never going to say the second part, right? So you're going to build up all this trust around the expectations set by the first system, only to have the 44th system snap into place almost as quickly as the second system, and you can't trust it like you did the first system. Whatever expectations you built up around the first, you have to throw out and start all over for number 2 through 45.
What if the reasonableness doesn't matter? So what if, like, you're looking for, natural language customer search in your CRM. You're looking for natural language code creation in your Git repository. You're looking for natural language presentation creation in your visualization tool. Does it really matter that it uses different underlying enforcer models in each one of those 3 examples?
Well, it does, because the results will be different, but the input will be the same. Like that's actually the problem, right? We have been really good in technology for 50 years of saying all of these improvements that you can build require their own language. No universal. We don't have a universal programming language, right? If you want to learn Python today, which is arguably the most used, most like widely applicable programming language, it's good at a whole bunch of things. It's great at 2 things. It's not good at 70 things.
Right.
Like you're going to have to suffer the pluses and minuses of whatever the language is that you choose. So
Right.
now we're saying it's English. Go with God.
Right.
Right. So I can't apply the same English to those 4 systems that you laid out and expect the underlying system to interpret the English the same way and thus give me the same quality of results. And because of that, by not changing the language, I'm setting everybody up for failure. And that's the issue that I have. And if you just look at like, here's my ERP, here's my CRM, here's my supply chain management tool, here's my MES, I can ask the same user may ask the same question to all 4 of those systems and get a drastically different result.
So if we look at that from a tech leadership standpoint, the executive at you guys' level, what can they be looking at? Is there a little bit of a light that they could say, here's what I need, where I need to go? Or right now they're still at an initial stage of all these tools and systems, and they just need to start creating just the strategy to then be able to implement it?
So what I would say, and I hope Paul has a different perspective, so we have an argument here in the next 20 minutes, or for the next 20 minutes, is pick one. Every user, every role, and I don't care how many roles you have, and I don't care how many, like how up and down the org chart it goes, they only get to interface with one LLM. So if you want that LLM to be SAP because SAP is your ERP, great. They don't then get to interface with any other LLM. So if that role needs data from another system, use the APIs that SAP offers to incorporate it into their LLM. It's the only way to give you that consistency. The point at which you say, I can't do that, those integrations don't exist, then you probably should start looking at, great, what does an LLM look like for our company, for our enterprise, and not use SAP's LLM, and not use Salesforce's LLM, and not all of these tools now have APIs. So you should be able to get to all of the data. So now the question is, where does the LLM need to reside? And the way you get around that lack of quality and the way you get around that lack of integration is you settle on one, again, just for the person. You're not going to use SAP's LLM for your custom-made applications that are not SAP applications. So it doesn't make sense to say this is our one LLM across the whole company. But you can absolutely say, I don't want my users to context switch from one language system to another language system to another language system where they don't understand the cost of those all being different. It's not gonna look different to them. They're gonna talk to it the same way, but the results are going to be different. Right? So when you're implementing these things, think about the operating model. And the operating model should be one user, one LLM. Paul?
What do you think, Paul?
Let me ask a clarifying question. So when you say one user, one LLM, you don't mean one LLM for the organization. You mean
that is correct.
Correct. Right.
I mean, if Susie in finance is going to use an LLM, they only get one. That may be different than Tom in manufacturing within the same company, right? That may be different than Claire in the legal department. Go ahead.
The nuance there, I think we do have a disagreement, which I think is healthy. So the nuance with your perspective is that while each one of those individual people have a core, right? Finance has a finance system, manufacturing is the MES, sales guy has the CRM. There are also a bunch of corporate systems that everybody accesses, like productivity tooling, like their like their corporate knowledge bases, where their HR Confluence is, right? So, and those tools might have a distinct sort of AI implementation that's different than the one that's in the MES. So I'm not sure you can have the universality per user that makes that true.
You can turn those off. You cannot turn those on. And that is exactly what I'm saying.
I see. I would argue the opposite to that. I would argue that don't focus on individual user, individual LLM, and focus on the corporate systems that have a wide swath of use across the organization and have a single model in those systems.
If you can have a single model in those systems, then we're right back to what I said, which is the point at which it becomes two or more, you have to have an enterprise LLM. An enterprise LLM solves it, but an enterprise LLM is also a huge undertaking.
And almost impossible if you're using a bunch of SaaS, right? SaaS, you're not going to be able to incorporate.
That's not necessarily true. Most of them also have an API that I can get access to.
I don't know if you've built a lot of AIs in the last couple of months, but the vast majority of connectors that we've tried don't actually work.
No,
they're not actually all that effective.
I use a ton of AI.
Yeah, go to corporate knowledge bases. To source a corporate knowledge base like a Confluence or even Drive is not a simple API call. It is a complex series of algorithms to make that true. It's not just go read doc, right? Because go read doc doesn't evaluate based on the security groups of your workplace implementation. You have to incorporate your own.
There's governance. Profiling. Yeah, there's governance on top of that. But if Google Docs is the way you're managing that, you have a problem. Like Google
you aren't, but you have Google.
Sure, but again, if you're looking for an easy button, there's no easy button.
There is no easy button. No. Right? I'm just saying that the connectors up to now have been a problem because they don't incorporate the enterprise complexity.
It depends on how you build the connectors. And if you're looking for an easy button, like if you're looking to build the connector at the global read-only level, it'll work, but you then lose all of the compliance requirements for it, and so you have to layer compliance in another way.
Which is why I kind of like the out-of-the-box ones in the Salesforce as an example. We'll take Einstein AI. Is that it's already complying to the security implementation, compliance implementation of Salesforce that you've already set up. And yes, I agree that if one were to ask the same question, how many customers do I have in Canada, you might get a different answer in Salesforce than you do in your MES. But at least you can ask the question versus searching for it yourself.
Sure. But I don't think that solves the problem. Like at what point do you just say, okay, cool, I have an infinite number of data sources in an infinite number of silos with no more cohesion amongst them, and I now put two people in the same room from different departments to try to have a discussion about what our sales look like, and because those systems are totally separate, there is no more authoritative answer. And in 5 years, we're fully reliant on LLMs.
Is there any difference from what it will be now? Because the data is the data.
Sure, because now what I say is, cool, to get to this answer, I create a semantic layer and a data science group.
In a warehouse and a data lake and a whole bunch of
all of the things I need to do, I still need to do, is my point.
Yeah.
And throwing LLMs in front of applications that should never be thought of as authoritative and yet are does not solve any of these problems. It just creates more. It's just kicking the can down the road on a problem that we have been kicking the can down the road on since we put the first bits of data on the first shared storage.
So let's take this then. If we look at creating an idea of where we should go, we're mentioning that we need to then clean the data so we can have a good source of trust. So then the LLM will get to the data, so then everybody will share it. Is that the utopia or where we want to go?
We have to do the same thing we've had to do for years, right?
So,
but keep in mind, 100% of these companies that are integrating AI into their application are doing it for their benefit, not for our benefit. 0% of them are doing it for our benefit. They are 100% doing it for their benefit.
Because there's a premium to that service.
Well, even if there's not a premium, there's a stickiness to that service. Right? So
there will be the option to integrate to, let's say, do RAG or some way that you can, from that central LLM that you pick, to make the calls to your main applications. Will that help?
Depends on what you mean by that.
So let's say that we, like you said, the idea that you build the interface for the LLM, and if you have an Salesforce, an ERP, and an MIS, that you then specifically say, I need to be able to get the data so I can bring it, and then call. So then I can then, now you're bringing the data. Now LLM, do your work based on this retrieval that you did.
That's effectively what you want to do with where semantic layers are going. Right? The LLMs do not change the fundamental fact that enterprise systems are not prepared for citizen data scientists.
Yeah.
They're lipsticking a pig so that you use their expensive LLM services to make you believe that. Now, there are some very low risk LLMs that you can get value from right away. Right? The things that integrate with email to help you write emails better, fantastic. Also, they're low risk, and I don't have to work with my corporate data to make that happen. Right? Like the Microsoft Office Copilot and the G Drive Gemini, those things can have value right now, today, fine, rock and roll. Right. But the reality is that's not where we're going. That's not the stuff we really want to have access to. We want to have access to the high value and thus higher risk data sets. In order to do that, you can't get away from this stuff has a high cost to it. This stuff has a higher risk to it, and thus really has to be managed in what's in your best interest, not in what's in the best interest of insert name of vendor here. Right now I will tell you, SAP, Oracle, they are happy if you say all of our data will just go into SAP and we'll use their LLM. Again, benefits them. Your data size grows. Your HANA licenses grow, right? Your Oracle licenses grow. They're happy with that. They're thrilled. They'll happily enable that forever. What happens when their model is the 19th best model on the list of models? Right?
But they do that for both. And by both, I mean AI and analytics as being different disciplines. So each one of those systems, especially very big commercial SaaS, have their own data lake and data warehouse. And that you can, in fact, use Atlassian, if you wanted to, as your corporate data warehouse, connect all your data pipelines into that.
For sure.
And APIs out if you had to. Would you? Probably not, but you could.
That's also why we have semantic layers.
You could use it for your enterprise search, right? Have it connect to all of your knowledge bases and do the same thing.
But again, that's why we have semantic layers. Right? We specifically have semantic layers because moving all of the data to one system is not a tenable solution long term.
But if one system is an externalized data lake, it's effectively the same, right? So if I've chosen to put it into BigQuery, all of my enterprise data, there's not a huge distinct difference between pipeline to BigQuery and pipeline to Atlassian. It's still a one.
No. But a semantic layer doesn't hold the data at all. A semantic layer holds the transformation and the queries.
Right.
So it doesn't, like, the goal of that is to not be yet another repository of data, but rather to be a repository of business logic to query exchange. Right. Now, putting AI around that has tremendous potential and tremendous value.
I'm just less convinced it's necessary. Like, I hear you. From a utopia perspective, I hear you that it would be valuable if conceptually a semantic implementation of what customer means across the entire organization to which I can query and even produce AI automation from would be brilliant. I'm not sure that has a level of reasonableness per department. I'm generally okay that a 6,000 person Salesforce who uses almost exclusively Salesforce be perfectly fine getting Salesforce centric answers. Doesn't require any other question from any other system.
Yeah. So we're right back to we're right back to the first thing I said, which is one person, one LLM. Right. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just accept the limitations of it. Just accept that that everyone that gets their information from one place is in an echo chamber of that place. Right. And in many cases in business, that's totally fine. your example of a Salesforce, it is absolutely totally fine. Matter of fact, there is significant positive motivation that every single answer comes from Salesforce. Why? Because with a Salesforce, I want everything in the CRM. They're motivated to not put it in there. The more valuable I make the CRM, the more likely they are to put it in there. If I can make that the only record, much less the record of authority, then I'm also going to get to completeness. Then they're also motivated to make sure that it's accurate. Today, they're not motivated to do either of those things, right? So again, in that case, one person, one LLM, perfect. Perfect. I have no opposition to that. And I truthfully do not care if that means in your organization, you technically have 45 LLMs running.
Right. Because you have 45 user units. Yeah.
Correct. Because you have 45 different orgs, you have 45 different purposes. When it gets down to it, they really only live and die in one system. It's great.
Right.
But when it comes to
your argument is that when they go to a productivity tool in that sense, outside of their CRM or their MES or their ITSM, that you shouldn't also enable a second LLM.
Correct. Or you should at least strongly consider the potential damage that you're causing by doing that. We already struggle with trust.
Right. Because they're apt to ask a like question and get a different result. Even if it's not exactly the same. A like question and get a different result.
Okay, you're going to ask questions within the context of your job to whatever tool is available for you to ask questions. It's not going to occur to you that, well, if I ask a question here and I ask a question to Salesforce, one of these may not even have the data that I need. It's still going to give an answer. It's still a language model.
I buy that. I was just pushing back on, if I were to look at 500 use cases of either analytics or AI, vast majority of that is single system use cases versus enterprise multi-system use cases. That's the pushback, is saying then I think it's probably more appropriate to one user, one algorithm in the main system that they would normally use on a daily basis. And there are some finance or senior executive use cases that require roll up across systems, to which you then probably need to have some sort of enterprise, either semantic and or a platform to support it. Yeah,
but it also, like, if you look at it that way, also you end up with, I don't need all my data there. No CEO is querying all of the data.
They're not.
Right? The CFO is not querying all of the data. What the C-level is looking to do when they're in that room together is query a superset of data that's relatively small and focused on the decisions they need to make. At which point, a lot of this actually becomes a whole lot simpler, because you can then focus a data team just on providing that data to a place where quality is totally reasonable. Also, quality is perfectly critical. You don't have the ability to be off by 10% on your financial numbers, right? You don't have the ability to be off 10% on total number of sales, nor do you have the ability in that room to have 17 different definitions of sale. Settle all that crap beforehand, and then you can create a kind of clean space, a clean data lake that is for those broad strategic decisions that requires that level of precision.
So will something that automatically route those calls between the systems be similar to the semantic layer, or will that actually be more of a problem? Because I've been seeing some of those that are trying to target enterprises that leave the data where it is or integrate with all your LLMs. We will take care of that. So do you think that will help, or
integrate with all your LLMs? I have seen that. I'm not sure how that would work. Because effectively they're not rags, right? like
it's like they're passing the call, and then from what they get,
sure, and they're reinterpreting. Like I've seen a few of those. It's the weirdest thing, and it's a great way to fundraise right now. Like, if you can get a working demo of that, you probably could get a VC to give you $1 million. You know what I mean?
Let's not confuse NLP with LLM. Like, absolutely, semantic tool sets use NLP. It doesn't necessarily mean it requires LLM to support that.
For sure. But semantic layers are distinctly different. And also, you wouldn't use a semantic layer at the executive level. You really don't need the semantic layer there, right? Feeding into there, you might. Right? You might use a semantic layer to feed into the data set referenced by the C-suite for those strategic decision-making capabilities, because the semantic layer does allow you to turn your business terms into repeatable, trustworthy queries.
That's always the irony of demonstration, right? Is they'll show, an LLM prompt implementation that's converting your phrase to SQL,
right?
Saying, isn't it cool that I could say, give me all the customers in Canada? But the feedback from the users is always, I wouldn't ask that question. What I want to see is a list of countries with number of customers in that list. Like, right. I wouldn't ask this very specific question. How many customers are there in Canada? I don't need to know. I want to see the list. Right?
It's not a question that has any relevance. Right?
Pardon?
It's similar to saying, how many square kilometers is Canada?
Right.
Why would I care about that?
No,
unless I'm on Jeopardy, in which case I can't use the computer anyways. Why would I care about that?
Cool, it can do that. I would never ask it that question.
Right. My favorite was, I was watching the demo at Black Hat, and they're like, hey, we're going to bring up our expert in our XDR, and we're going to have them do these investigations. At the same time, we're going to have someone that's never seen our platform answer the same investigation question using our LLM. Right? So this guy is going to do like the SQLite query. This guy is going to do the LLM query. And the LLM was always faster. Always. But it wasn't always right. And to a disturbing degree. And what was funny about it was the only way to know it wasn't right was to know what right was. Not to a perfect number. Right? Sure. But when you're like, hey, I need an answer to this question, and you type it in, the LLM goes 37. And you're like, no, it should be closer to 25,000. Right. And it was literally that sort of thing. Right? And you're like, no, fundamentally you're off. Well, the only way to know that is to actually know that. Right. So,
or at least give it a ceiling and floor to say your answer should be in this range. And if it's not in this range, there's a problem.
But you still have to know that that's the range. If you've never seen the tool set and you're new to the company, and this is how they're throwing you in so you can become valuable, you're going to be wonderfully valuable at producing garbage. Because you don't know what real looks like. You don't know what good looks like. And that's the other kind of thing that I see happening here is, I don't know, at Hitachi I talked about it as the death of expertise. Right? We have to build expertise to understand these things. And we are now to the point where the future looks like we're going to do everything we can to remove expertise. I mean, it's great for us, right? It's great for us graybeards because we're going to retire and they're going to go, hey, remember that whole COBOL thing that we never got away from? Yeah, we'd like to bring you back and we're going to pay you 10 times your hourly rate as a consultant because we're just not building expertise anymore. And the systems the people that we're left with aren't smart enough to know that the systems we put in place aren't smart enough to give us the right answer.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to share next week to then try to understand how they're going to move forward. Because one thing that I've seen, like you mentioned, they're pushing a lot of systems, and I've seen a lot of people trying to push those systems. And I took a couple of weeks looking at their expectation, and then there's a bunch of open source tools that look very good. But when you look at it, if you implement them on an enterprise level, you will fail every possible audit for the next 10 years. Like, implement this LLM without no authentication, implement this other connector without like nothing, and it will work perfectly fine. So you can do your work. So looking forward to what they're going to share next week.
We'll get a little meta. We'll get all the content from next week. We'll put it into Notebook LM. We'll produce a podcast, and then we'll do a podcast about that podcast.
Nice.
That'll be
because we got the primary information, and then we can listen to the secondary information and then judge whether it's appropriate to the primary information. Sounds fun.
Sure. That means I got to pay a lot more attention in the rooms next week than I had planned on. Right. We're not allowed to pay attention, Paul. We can't just text each other back and forth how dumb the content is. We actually pay attention.
Or evaluate our next lightning lane time.
Well, I will leave you with the final thing. So for next week, I have this.
Ooh, you
Wallet?
got one.
Yes. So this is Plod AI.
Oh, nice.
This is a recorder that's designed to upload phone calls or meetings, right? Whatever's spoken, and then give you a transcript and notes and all the useful information automatically.
Is Florida a first party state?
I mean, it's Republican, so I have to assume so.
All right, so you don't need to seek permission by the second party.
No.
To record.
It's also a conference with where everything is public. You know what I mean? Like they're broadcasting. So
Right.
less worried about it.
I was gonna say
You're not gonna
study
keep it in
fed.
your pocket the entire time. Have personal conversations.
Oh no, I absolutely am.
We'll see you on Friday.
I want to try. I want to try and see like what is the actual value to having this thing with you constantly making notes, constantly judging you.
I'm not sure if you already try it, but your iPhone now has that option on iOS 18.
Well, 18.1. So if you're running
Yeah.
18.1 beta with Apple Intelligence and you've opted in and done the thing, it does. And my goal is to compare them and see the difference. Now, my hope is, I don't know if you've noticed, but the iPhone battery is not amazing on Apple Intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? Like it already wasn't amazing if you did voice recording for 4 hours. So my hope is if I put the recording effort on this thing's battery, that I will not, destroy the battery of my main device.
Right.
Don't you have to have it plugged in to the iPhone so it can work?
There is no plug.
No, but like it shouldn't be like connected, like on the magnetic on the back.
It does not have to be connected. No. It has to be connected if you're doing phone calls.
Okay. So you can probably use
Phone calls, so.
a magnetic battery, so you can keep a charge.
Maybe those suck. They generate more heat than they do extended life.
Exactly. You can't even hold on to them after 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then it's a 6-pound brick.
All right,
So,
sir.
my friends, there you have it. The predictions for next week. We're gonna hear AI. We're gonna hear AI, and magically someone gonna walk and gonna be a cyborg or something. So let's see what they come out next week. That will be what gonna direct all the companies for the next 12 months. We're gonna be there. We'll see you there. If you're there, you know us. Say hi. But we'll see you in our next episode.